Started so we can welcome to the Muckboots in the Capital update with FA for March 10th, 2025. Oh, not going. Okay, I am Alice Morrison, the co-executive director of Friends of Family Farmers in charge of policy work, and as always, I am your guide to this week's state legislative update for Oregon in the 2025 long session. So today's agenda, we are going to talk a little bit about our priorities. We don't have massive updates, but wanted to talk through kind of where we are in the legislative calendar specifically and how that relates to the priorities and what we're looking at. Then we did have our rally day at the Capitol last week. Thank you to all who attended, and we'll kind of review how that went and what the action steps leading off of rally day are. We're going to touch on 3 hearings that are happening this week that FOF is tracking. And then I wanted to just include some discussion time at the end. So we'll go through kind of the topics that were discussed specifically related to the proposed farm stand bill, HB 3133 for agritourism, and talk about the work group on agritourism and how some of those discussions played out. And then once we shut off the recording, I do have some want to give the opportunity for folks to weigh in on feedback for that as well. All right. So first things first, FOF priority updates. Our state meat inspection bill 2164. This bill is very much still in Ways and Means. We do anticipate that this will probably, statistically, probably won't have a hearing. It's pretty rare for a bill like this with such a low fiscal to have its own hearing. It will probably be included in budget reconciliation at the end of the session, but we are doing everything in our power to keep this elevated in our legislators' minds so that they know to look out for this. We have been working with the Ways and Means, the Joint Ways and Means Committee folks, both the chairs of the full committee and folks on the Natural Resources Subcommittee to make sure they're aware of this priority. I do have a little bit of news on the related bill. So for those of you who've been tracking this issue, our bill, HB 2164, is requesting staff time for ODA for inspectors for the state meat inspection program. There's also a related policy bill that was put forward by the Department of Agriculture to kind of fix an administrative barrier that was unintentional in the creation of the program. And it is expanding the state meat inspection program to include poultry inspection because there was some ambiguity in the wording of the authorization for ODA in the original, when this program was originally authorized back in 2020. And so poultry was not able to be included in the cooperative agreement with USDA that was signed in 2022. And so now we're going back to fix that wording to allow ODA's state meat inspection program to inspect and certify poultry facilities to open up that avenue for increased pastured meat production in the state, which we think is a great idea. So the work session for that bill was last week, and it did get voted out of the committee with unanimous support. And it's going to the House floor with a do pass recommendation or the Senate floor rather, sorry. It started on the Senate side, and the Senate Natural Resources Committee was its first policy committee. Then it was voted out of that committee last Tuesday and is on its second reading. It's going to the Senate floor for a vote as soon as they work through that process, and then it will be assigned to its House committee. So sorry for the typo there on the slide. All right, the small farm water access bill. So this is a bill that is currently still in placeholder mode. It is HB 3372. We have been working with Rep. Owens and to a lesser degree Rep. Helm to bring forward some kind of common sense, balanced, small solution. We know that the prior appropriation system has created lots and lots of different barriers and problems for water access for commercial use here in Oregon. It has also created systems that, are very, in some ways, are very crucial to preserving the natural resources of the state. And we want to find a way to balance our approach. We do think we still have the tools to make that happen. We have been talking to all kinds of stakeholders about this issue, both conservation groups and other commercial irrigators and all kinds of folks in between. And this is the thing that we need to happen here is that we need our legislative partners to be motivated to schedule this bill for a hearing and work session before the first chamber deadline so that we know we'll have the opportunity to speak publicly about this, and also so that we know that this issue could move forward here in the 2025 legislative session. So we met with 42 legislators during Rally Day about this issue. It was part of the suite of issues that we introduced in our small farms mean business agenda. And we did get a lot of meaningful feedback that folks understand the problem here and are really interested in helping us find a solution. There were a lot of folks who knew exactly what solution would be the one to be passed, obviously. But we really raised the profile of this issue and are very grateful for everyone who attended and really drove home the importance of this issue as it relates to equitable farmland access, entry points into agriculture, all of those things. But in this session timeline, there are a couple of dates that we need to have things done by. There are some deadlines approaching. So we are sitting here at March 10th. There are two deadlines approaching that are related to the first chamber deadline. So all bills start out in one chamber or the other, the House or the Senate, and then they have to move on through the process by certain points in the session in order to still have a chance to be alive. This is a necessity of the process because more than 3,000 bills are introduced every session, and we cannot wait around on every issue to have all of the narrowing conversations that we need to have. So we do have some deadlines coming up. Bills must be scheduled for a hearing and work session by March 21st. It's really the work session scheduled deadline, but you have to have a hearing before you can have a work session. So it's the deadline for both. They must be on the calendar and on the committee agenda by March 21st for one of the dates subsequent. And it has to be completed by April 9th. April 9th is the deadline for the getting through your first chamber. So that is really important. And those are some deadlines that at the beginning of the session seemed much further away, and now they are in the next couple weeks. So now is the time. We really are putting a lot of pressure on our legislative partners to bring this issue to light and to give it the time of day, because we know the farmers that we serve, like many of you on this call, we want to be allowed to engage in the democratic process on this issue. We want to be able to say what we need in a public forum, have the opposition say their opposition out loud and not hide behind closed door discussions about whether, this would make them happy or that would make them happy. We want everyone to come to the table in the light of day and say what needs to be done on this issue. We do have some talking points here. We have the tools to find a balanced solution this session. I said this on the previous slide, but we have engaged in so much community feedback and stakeholder engagement here. We have so much information about what would compose a viable solution. We need to have more farmers in the system, not less. We are in a situation where we are consistently losing farms and farmers. Every time the USDA does a census of agriculture, and that is not sustainable. If we want to be able to feed ourselves into the future, we have to create entry points. And we do need to think about our resource management solutions holistically, not only in a first in time, first and right kind of way, but also the future that we're creating. We have to have that in mind when we're thinking about future management of natural resources. And we believe that there is a solution here. So really looking forward to continuing this conversation, hopefully very soon, because time is a ticking. All right, so I wanted to review what happened on Rally Day. We don't have the official photographs back yet from the photographer. She is editing away, making sure that everything is crisp and beautiful. But we did have 82 people attend Rally Day. We engaged in 42 legislator meetings. Everybody who came was signed up for at least 3 meetings. We grouped everyone together in groups of between 4 and 8-ish people. We highlighted our 2 FOF priorities, the state meat inspection bill and the small farm water access bill. We heard from 4 partners for bills of support during our morning program, and we touched on some really awesome budget priorities, which we will talk about in just a moment. Here are all the bills that we talked about during our rally day. We have our priority bill, HB 2164 for meat processing. We have HB 3372 for small farm water access. We discussed the crucial grant funds in HB 2979 for the food system resilience programs to continue. This is a reinvestment in the OCFSN small farmer rancher disaster resilience grants, as well as the OCFSN food hub grants for, I believe it's climate resilience and infrastructure grants for food hubs, and the Oregon Farmers Market Association OFMA farmers market climate resilience grants as well. Then we heard from Oregon Ag Trust on the Oregon Agricultural Heritage Program. We heard from our partners at Piccoon about the Agricultural Workforce Labor Standards Board bill, which I'm going to talk about again in just a second. And we heard from our partners in Northeast Oregon, from the Labguama and Oregon Rural Action, the organization serving those communities, about the governor's groundwater accountability measures in SB 1154. We also highlighted some budget priorities during our lobby day. Of course, Oregon Ag Heritage Program, which has a bill vehicle that is requesting the full amount of dollars that we would need to get all of the shovel-ready projects through the process. There's also a line item in the OWEB budget to have some minimal funding through that grant, and we think we should 100% continue the funding of this program in the OWEB budget, and we should also increase that funding to meet the need that is out there, because we are very much falling behind other states in the nation and falling behind our own goals of farmland preservation. We also have Oregon Department of Education, the Farm to School program is requesting, is included in the budget, but is requesting an increase to meet the demand, especially as we move into a less certain global economic future. It is very advantageous for us to think about ways that we can maximize food production and food supply chains for our institutional buyers and for schools and children in general, by prioritizing local and domestic food sources. So farm to school is a great way to do that. Related to farm to school, in the Department of Agriculture budget, there is a farm to school infrastructure and equipment grant program. It was previously $1 million. It was decreased to $500,000 in a previous biennium, and we're requesting that it goes, with our partners at Farm to School, are requesting that that fund goes back to $1 million to allow more grant funds to help small farms and community food systems be equipped to supply our farm to school and institutional partners. So again, making our communities more resilient, more able to feed themselves. And then speaking of, we also have the Oregon DHS line item to maintain continuing service level for Double Up Food Bucks. So Double Up Food Bucks is the SNAP matching program, which is well loved in our community for sure. And also provides matching incentives for use of your SNAP card at farmers markets, at CSAs, at grocery stores and farm stands. So lots of different ways. That program has really expanded over the last couple of years. It's not just farmers markets, but it is well loved, has a triple bottom line of getting more nutritious food to people, getting more people into community and bringing people together in a physical community space, and putting more money into farmers' pockets, which is always a good thing to allow them to keep growing food for our communities. So Double Up Food Bucks, we're going to talk about that one in a second as well. So that is what we highlighted during Rally Day. Thank you to everyone who came out to Salem for that day. We think it was a big success, and that we were really pleased with a lot of the feedback that we got from our legislators who signed up for the meetings with our groups. Everyone was really happy to be able to put farmer faces to names and to understand who we serve when we show up into a room. And I think that it only makes our movement stronger when we show that, hey, we care enough to be there with you. So thank you so much to everyone who came out. It was a great event, and we're really grateful for the support of the community. All right, so I'm going to talk about 3 things that are coming up on the legislative agenda this week. So we talked about it before, the Agricultural Workforce Labor Standards Board. It is having a hearing, HB 2548, which is chief sponsored by Representative Valderrama. It is having its hearing in the Labor and Industry Committee in the House at 3 p.m. on Tuesday, or not Tuesday, Wednesday, sorry, the 12th. So written testimony is due 48 hours after the hearing. So written testimony is due by 3 p.m. on Friday, the 14th. So the hearing is at 3 p.m. on Wednesday, the 12th. Written testimony is due by 3 p.m. on Friday, the 14th. And FOF has a template that we have adapted some of Piccoon's materials. Piccoon is the leader on this issue, but has really been bringing us along. And so we worked with Piccoon on their template to add some FOF farmer and farm employer points of why we think this is an important thing to move forward. In general, yes, it is, the Labor Standards Board is about maintaining conversation and making sure that we in Oregon are treating our workers with dignity, respect, and fairness. And also, it is a great tool for us as an industry to come together and make sure that there is a space where both farm workers and farm employers have a consistent and empowered space to make determinations for our industry. I think that something that resonates the most with us at FOF is that we would much rather have a structured space with equal representation of workers and employers and government agencies that like BOLI and ODA and what have you, whatever. It's written in the bill, and that could be something that you talk about, is how equal representation and who's in the room is really important in your testimony. But having that space dedicated to this is really a preferable solution than having legislators with limited to no farm labor experience or farm employer experience bringing policies in the political landscape of Salem once every 2 years. This is an opportunity for our industry to find solutions that work for us, and also to raise the standards of care and compensation and all of the things that go into making it a great industry to work in, to make our labor pool more competitive here in Oregon. We have really heard a lot about worker shortages, about turnover of farm workers, and making our workplace labor standards more competitive will attract more folks and keep folks working in agriculture. And that's a good thing for farm employers. So we are very interested in seeing that bill move forward, and we will have more information up on the website very soon. All right, and then we also have a hearing for the Oregon Department of Human Services budget bill. So all of the departments, agencies have a bill that encompasses their budget. And the hearing for the DHS budget, the Department of Human Services budget, is also on Wednesday. So the coalition behind Double Up Food Bucks, which is led by the Farmers Market Fund, which is the organization that administers those matching funds, they have put together a sign-on letter. There's going to be very, very limited opportunity to testify on this budget hearing because it is a huge, expansive agency that has a lot of things in its budget. So Farmers Market Fund has asked for us to circulate a sign-on letter to show your support for Double Up Food Bucks and its inclusion in this agency budget. So we will be sending that out. And Rachel Ward, the executive director of Farmers Market Fund, would love folks to prioritize signing on before Wednesday so that she can present that in the hearing. And I think that we can also submit testimony up through Friday, but we're prioritizing getting folks on the sign-on letter by Wednesday for Double Up Food Bucks. And thank you for bearing with us on these short timelines because we don't often get a lot of notice on these things from the legislature. Um, then the last thing that we're tracking in the legislature this week is this is a Senate version of HB 2097. So this is Senate Bill 108 to extend the crop donation tax credit. So this is a tax credit that's currently in play and will sunset. And so this is a tax credit that folks can get for donating crops that, are not going into another market. Like you can get tax incentives for donating the food that you grow as a farmer to hunger programs like your regional food bank, your local food bank, those kinds of things. And we think that this is a vital piece of the puzzle to encourage folks not only to reduce waste, but also to put as much food as possible back into the local community. And extending this tax credit, crop donation tax credit is a positive thing. So that will be in Senate rules on Wednesday morning at 8 a.m. And testimony is due, again, 48 hours after that hearing at 8 a.m. on Friday the 14th. So 3 bills coming up. Really exciting stuff. Lots of things happening on Wednesday. All right, cool. So we have something in the chat here. Yeah, busy week for sure. All right, so we had the final meeting of the agritourism working group last week, and I wanted to touch base with you all about a proposal that is coming forward from the Oregon Property Owners Association. It's HB 3133, I believe, and it is to do with farm stands. So farm stands are a very popular way to sell your food that you've grown or raised directly to the consumer, to bring people out to the farm, to understand farming in general, to create more of a connection between farm and food and people who might not interact with agriculture on a daily basis. So there are a couple of things in this bill that I wanted to talk about that I think that this bill, my impression was that they are open to an amendment, but some of the main topics that were discussed right now, farm stands are allowed to have 25% of their revenue come from what's called incidental items, which are non-farm products that are sold in the farm stand. So that could be something like t-shirts or candy bars or something like that that is not in any way raised on your farm or an adjacent farm, and is sold at the farm stand to kind of bring more of a holistic experience, especially if your farm stand is also part of another agritourism activity like a U-pick or a hayride or a pumpkin patch or something like that. That is pretty common practice. And the standard has been 25% of sales of incidental items. So you have to have 75% of the sales happening at that farm stand be from farm products. This is something that was under discussion at the work group. And there are some folks who believe that that is too much of an administrative burden and not easily provable, and counties don't really have the ability to go in and assess your books in that way, and there's too much technical information in between proving that and what someone might experience when they're doing, a visual inspection, to make that easily enforceable. And so there were some things put forward about like, oh, well, if you can demonstrate that this property, based on the number of events or instances per year, or the acreage involved is predominantly agriculture, so not more than half of this agritourism activity, or yeah, the non-farm product kind of deal, then you would be good to go. I think that the general feeling in the work group was that that is a little too vague, that we wanted to make sure that there were some very objective standards that folks can hold themselves to. And I tend to agree. I think that part of the problem with agritourism standards here in Oregon is that there seems to be a lot of confusion in enforcement, and there is a certain amount of the law that counties are allowed to adopt or not adopt, and they have a lot of interpretive authority based on the way that DLCD and the county zoning and planning offices interact. So I am very concerned that that approach would lead to vastly different standards in different parts of the state. And it would also lead to a situation where if someone wanted to try to loophole that rule, then because you're farming 365 days a year and you're doing some kind of event 364 days a year, that could skew this operation to have more of a tourism value than an agricultural value. And so I think that I understand the impetus, but I think that in general, we're looking for ideas for standards that are more objective than the 25% rule. And I don't know that that acreage or number of activity days captures that. So feedback on that. Again, I'm just going to run through these points and then we're going to turn the recording off and open for discussion. Then there's a question about prepared foods at farm stands. The question continued to be, well, we do have to say restaurants are not a permitted use of EFU zone land. That is very much not in the purview of like what is considered a farm use. And so there was a lot of discussion about whether or not including some ability to have prepared foods that predominantly highlight your farm product. An example that was given in the work group is that if you raise cows, both beef cows and dairy cows, and you want to sell a cheeseburger that is made of your beef and your cheese that you raised here at the farm, is that something that could be allowed through a farm stand? And then the other example that was brought up was a strawberry shortcake. If you grow strawberries, you have a you pick strawberry, you have a wholesale strawberry, you have your farm stand's full of strawberries. Are you allowed to prepare those strawberries and serve them over a shortcake that you didn't necessarily make? I think that we do not want to get into a space where permanent restaurant facilities are being built on farmland, because that is not a permitted use of EFU zone land. But I think that there are solutions that we could explore through some of the ways that farmers markets have accomplished these goals. For example, all counties have something called a temporary restaurant license, which would enable people to have a temporary pop-up restaurant, perhaps in an easy up that is not purpose built, that would allow them to serve prepared food for a certain duration during the year. Or there are ways to get permits to have food trucks at certain events. And so if you have a permanent event and you have the ability to bring a food truck there, we have prepared foods. There are also a lot of prepared foods that are currently legal to sell through farm stands that are not for on-site consumption through the cottage food law and the farm direct producer process exemption. Or if you have a commercial kitchen or you do co-packing or something, you are still allowed to sell your value-added product, even though it wasn't produced, like even if you were co-packing it with someone else, if you grew that food, it still qualifies as a farm product when you sell it in your farm stand. So I think that there are already a lot of prepared food options. I want us to be careful about going down a road that would allow someone to have a restaurant that has like one item on the menu that has a farm product in it, moving forward. So I think that there is some nuance that needs to be captured there, and whether or not we can learn from the temporary restaurant license or current agritourism event permitting law rules that would allow you to bring in prepared foods, that kind of thing. There was also a discussion, let me check the time. Yep, we are over time. There's also discussion about having events inside or outside the farm stand. This is a place where I would love to have your all's opinions here, because there was disagreement in the room about whether or not this is currently allowed. Some folks are saying that they've been told by their county permitting authorities that they are only allowed to have their events, or they're currently allowed agritourism events and farm stand activities outside the farm stand. And then some folks are saying, oh, well, I'm allowed, like, it is currently written in the law that you are allowed to have it inside the farm stand. And in a place like Oregon, where we often have inclement weather for half of the year, it would be valuable to be able to conduct those currently permitted activities, like an agritourism based farm to table dinner, or a workshop about like directly promoting the sale of your product. That should be allowed to be inside of a farm stand, in my opinion. So these are things that were talked about in the work group and will be part of our analysis of 3133 and any amendments that come forward. And I know that we are over time for this week's update, so